Joe Ingram 1, also known as Chicago Joey. He's kind of like an old war buddy. We used to play full ring no limit Holdem back in 2009, 2010. It's kind of like a lifetime ago. And since then he's become one of the most important characters or pivotal characters in the Holdem and Omaha community. Even coined the phrase, the great game, to refer to Omaha, which most people call it these days actually. So yeah, interesting character. Let's get into the video. Today I'm here to give you some more practical advice about how to actually play the game. Let's start with under the gun. Should be opening 17% of hands. Some of the weakest hands, like if you want the cutoff point, like 10-9-8-6 single suit, Queen Jack 9-6 double suited, Ace Jack 8-5 with the ace high suit, Ace 10 4-5 with the ace high suit. These are some of the weakest hands you open. Ace high suit with a pair, this tends to be open mostly. So if you have an ace high suit with a Broadway card and a pocket pair, pretty much all of those will get opened, and they're right around the bottom in terms of those type of hands. The only hands with 3 of a kind in them that you would open is aces, and if you actually got dealt 4 aces, this never happened to me personally, but if you got dealt 4 aces under the gun, you would fold, or you should fold. I mean, it would be kind of fun to play, but hey, fold it. And if you do face a 3-bet with the 17% of hands that you open, if the 3-better is in position on you, you'll fold about a third of the time. 30% is like a good approximate. So if you just look at your hand, if it's at the bottom third of your opening range, fold that shit out of position. If you're 3-bet by somebody you're in position on, then you're only folding around 15% of the time. So take the bottom 15%, go ahead and fold that. For middle position, we should be opening 22.5% of hands. And it's hard in Omaha to, I can't just list off like what all the worst hands you should open are. There's so many. But I'll just give you a few examples, like an 8-7-5-4, single suited to the 8, King 10-9-7, even triple suited if it's to the king. Ace King 7-6 suited to the king as well. If it was suited to the ace, you can open under the gun. Suited to the king, you can open under the gun +1, aka middle position. Ace 10-9-4 with ace high suit. 8-8 deuce deuce if it's single suited. 7-7 deuce deuce is a fold for what it's worth, so that 8-8 deuce deuce is around the line if it has a suit. And yeah, if you get 3-bet by an in-position player from your middle position open, you will only be folding 22%. You could just, as a rule of thumb, think, is this the worst fifth of what I'm opening? If so, I fold it when I'm out of position to the 3-better. And if the person who 3-bets you is out of the blinds, then you'd fold only, on average, 12%. Slightly more folding is done against the small blind than the big blind because his range is a little bit tighter, but it's not a big deal. From cutoff, we should open 32% of hands. Some examples of weak ones. Now with the ace king high hands that have an ace suit, we can open a 7 and a 3, so ace king 7-3. You can have like an ace 10-9-7 low suit that can open up now. Having an ace in your hand is still good. The chance of you getting 3-bet is significantly less. So hands that have connectivity in a suit and an ace do tend to get opened. A pair with an ace tends to get opened. King Queen 6-5, some of these like 2 separate straight draw type of hands with the high suit can be opened. Pretty much all queens with a suit, like pocket queens with a suit, can get opened except for the weaker ones like Queen Queen 8 deuce, 7 deuce, deuce 3. They'll still be getting folded. Jacks and 10s similarly, if you have a suit plus a little bit of connection, so like Jack Jack 10-5 with a suit, 10-10 9 whatever with a suit. These hands can get opened from cutoff. Although 10-10 9 deuce would be a fold. What else we got? Oh yeah, 3 Broadway cards with a suit. It doesn't matter what the other card is. You got Queen Jack 10 deuce with a suit. It's good to go. If you get 3-bet from the button, you're going to fold only 16.5% of that 32% that you're opening. So not folding too much, and if you 3-bet from the blinds, only folding an average of 7.5% of your range. So you're really peeling a lot. I mean, it is pot limit, you get pretty good odds to call, so understandable. On the button, we'll raise 52% of hands. Some shit ones. 10-7-6-4 with low suit. King 9-6 deuce for a double suited hand, like that gap, that low shitty connection, but still some connection in a double suited hand. Ace 6-5-4, like if you got the low suit, that's still good. The ace blocker usually pretty useful. King 9 7 6 with 3 suit low is going to be opened. 10 10 7 3 single suited is still getting opened. Queen 5 4 3. Queen high suit. You play this shit. Ace 8 6 3, like single suited to the ace, like a pretty bad ace, single suited, still valuable enough to play. Ace Queen 5 3 with the low triple suit, you'd still play. So if you have like Ace Broadway, 2 random cards and like a okay suit, you're still playing most of these hands basically. If you get 3-bet by an out of position player like either blind, you're folding like 4.5% total. Small blind strategy is quite complicated because it does depend what stakes you play or what the rake is. So for example, at lower stakes, you're gonna play 44.5% of hands and you should limp 7% of them. That's kind of tough to do because 7% limp, it's quite a narrow amount of hands. Whereas the higher stakes structure, you can play 54% of hands in total, you limp 21% and you open 33% for pot. For me, this was more intuitive, plus it's valuable to learn a strategy that it's not going to cost you much doing it at lower stakes, and then when you get to higher stakes, if that's your plan to move up, which for most people I hope it is, if you get to higher stakes, you're already used to the strategy, like you don't have to think as much about it, you get used to playing the hands post-flop and what your range feels like in each spot. So I think it's better to learn strategies that matter in the late game more. So I would recommend going for this. You play 54% of hands, you limp 21%, you open raise 33%, and in general, it's kind of like you limp the worst hands. So if you got like some broadways in your hand, but it's rainbow or it's triple suited, maybe you limp calling that. You don't really limp fold that much, at least I'm not too experienced with it. It's kind of like this king queen 6-4 rainbow, something like that you're probably giving a limp fold, but you are continuing most of the time that you enter the pot. And you do have some traps, so you will be limp raising some hands. The hands that are like bluffier are like these double suited aces that aren't that good. These double suited ace high hands that aren't that good. But you are trapping, like you're rolling like 50% of your really good double suited aces. The double suited connected aces, you limp raising and you're open raising them. I think the best way to do it is just to flip a coin, you know, in your head or however you want to decide. Around half the time of those really strong hands, open raise them, the other half, go for the limp raise. But yeah, blind v blind, a very complicated strategy just because you have so many hands and you play so many of them and you have to play them in different ways. But as long as you're thinking on your feet and you're trying to stay balanced, I think you'll be okay. I'd like to give some advice on Seabedding strategy, but I mean, it's really the bulk of the work when you want to learn a game and you want to put in hours studying. Learning what boards you Seabet, what sizes, and how often your range wants to bet really is most of what you're trying to remember. It's quite complicated. But I'll try and give like some simple takeaways. So for example, the button opens and we 3-bet out of the small blind. It comes ace paired, so like ace jack jack, ace 4-4, there's flush draw, it doesn't matter. We're gonna range bet a third pot or even smaller if you want, but I think a third pot's a good size. So we'll bet 100% of the time for a third pot. So that's pretty easy to implement into your game. And then say you got like a same situation, small blind, you 3-bet the button, it's 8-7-5 rainbow. This time instead of betting, we check 100% of the time. The board just favors our opponent's calling range too much. Maybe you got a board that's like some sort of Broadway board, like a queen 10-9, queen 10-8, maybe there's a flush draw, maybe there's not. These are complicated. We tend to half pot as our bet size if we bet, and we bet between 40 and 60% of the time depending on the specific board. So half pot about half the time. Kind of an okay rule of thumb. And then you got complicated boards where you mix sizes, like a queen 7-3 with a flush draw. Sometimes you're going to pot, sometimes you're going to check, sometimes you're going to half pot. I think for that board you might check about 20% of the time, pot about 20%, and half pot 60% of your range. And then you have to think, how does my hand fit into that strategy? It's a complicated game. We'll be doing more of the specifics of that in the next video. In Holdem, we get so few cards that I feel like Holdem players are better at using our blockers almost. Like, we might have the nut flush blocker and realize, well, we have this version of this nut flush blocker. Whereas I think a common thing that would happen with Omaha players is they have the nut flush blocker and they think, well, I'm just going to bluff. They don't think, well, how often do I have a suited ace in my defending range or my opening range? However you got to the flop, how many of your hand cards in your hand are going to be suited aces? How many of them are going to be offsuit? Because that greatly affects how often you should bluff in the exact situation. For example, I've seen opponents of mine with top set and the nut flush blocker just straight up bluffing on the river. you know, you probably have some amount of showdown value with that hand. You should not bluff with that particular one. So I think as a Holdem player, we kind of are in a good spot. We've learned to cherish what few blockers we have, and now in Omaha we have so many cards to work with. It does take a while to process all of the thinking. Like if you're just starting out at PLO, I'd really recommend just one tabling and trying to think a lot about each hand. I think it'll help your improvement of the game in general. It's just a good way to speed up the process of learning, and also you're not going to make as many mistakes, which, you know, will affect your bankroll as you continue your journey. So yeah, I think thinking about side cards is really cool in PLO. A common misconception that people have, for example, is on the river I might have no diamonds in my hand and diamond flush draw missed. So I might think, aha, my opponent could be bluffing with a missed flush draw. This is sort of the opposite of what's correct. Fish might bluff with a missed flush draw, but regs really shouldn't be bluffing with missed flush draws, because when they have those cards, it means you can't have a hand that's automatically going to fold, like a flush draw with like a random pair or a, you know, straight draw and a flush draw. We're not going to call the river with high card ace missing our flush draw. So they don't really want to hold those cards in their hand when they're bluffing themselves. And therefore, when we don't have them, we're not thinking, oh great, they could have them bluffing, because we should now know that they're actually not going to bluff with those hands, at least at reasonable stakes. And if it's a fish, like, you know, fish do tend to bluff with misdraws more, so that gets a bit tricky. But if you're just thinking GTO, yeah, you actually like having the missed flush draw cards in your hand when your opponent's betting the river, because if they don't have them, they unblock you having them. So for example, if I had two pair with a missed flush draw, this might be a really good hand to call a river bet depending on the board. Or like if I had top pair and blocked a straight, but I also missed a flush draw, this might be a good hand to call a river bet. So yeah, blockers and unblockers are very tricky. What you want to do, I guess, first is think, what hands should your opponent bluff with in theory? And then you should look at your own cards and say, okay, do I unblock those or do I block those? So if you're blocking his bluffs, that's not great. But blocking value tends to be better. So whatever if he's repping, you know, a straight and you have a pocket pair that blocks the straight plus two pair, this is a great hand to call with, obviously. So yeah, I'd say priority one with blockers is blocking value. Since your opponent bets only the maximum the size of the pot, if they bet full pot on the river, you're getting 2-to-1 to call. So if you can block value combos of theirs at an even frequency to blocking their bluffs, that favors you greatly. So yeah, priority one, blocking value. Priority two, unblocking bluffs. Simple tip, hopefully it's good.